All right, welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of 3 with Jared Hope on the Wise Guys Real Estate Podcast. Today's title is If Real Estate Investing is Your Vehicle, Make Sure You're Not Driving a Lemon to Hell. So we're going to get into, once you've acquired your properties, how do you maintain your portfolio? How do you maintain your sanity? How do you maintain your marriage, your life? So Jared's going to talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, you've learned lessons the hard way. Obviously, we'll get into some of that. Joel, do you want to ask an opening question?
Well, let's get into some entertainment here. There's got to be some nightmares. Tell us about it. I got a few.
Well, like, what do you want nightmares about?
Well, like
tenants,
I
have story. Oh, I got lots of those. But I think that's probably the nightmare that would go well with this segment, because the next one's going to be some horror stories and stuff like that. So I don't want to give away too much of my jam, but probably the biggest thing for me is just with the tie into this podcast is in 2010, and I've shared this story lots, and it's so, like, every time I share it, I get goosebumps, and it's so real that in 2010, so up until 2010, I think we had 110 properties, something like that. So in 2008, as everyone knows, or not everyone, but in 2008, we had this massive financial recession globally. And, everything hits the fan, and the housing market crashes all over the world. It's just a disaster. So at this point in time, I didn't know what a recession was. I had no idea. I was buying in a hot market. Everyone looks like a genius. When the market shifts, that's where everyone gets eggs on their face. And in 2010, I walked into a grocery store at Safeway just around the corner from my house. Walked into a grocery store. I had a Porsche 911 outside, convertible C4S. It was a rad car. It was one of my favorite cars. But it's parked outside. It's like 10 o'clock at night in the evening on an August night, and pops down. I go inside to buy groceries, $147 worth of groceries. And as I'm putting it through the till, the lady's like, how do you want to pay for this? I'm like, yeah, here's my bank card. And it was insufficient funds. And so then I'm like, oh, yeah, well, this is kind of up until this point, I was kind of lying to everybody, and I was trying to be this guy, this image to uphold. And I didn't know how to run a business. I didn't know how to read finances. I didn't know how to build a business with a wife and kids. Like, there's a lot of things that I didn't know. So I give her my Visa, declined, and I forgot my PIN. I give her my MasterCard, declined. I'm like, fuck, forgot my PIN. And so I ended up calling my dad. My dad pays my bill of $147 over the phone. And I come home that night, snap on Krista, because Krista's supposed to be managing all the bills and managing all the finances, and because that was her job. But she was also managing the house, which is a bigger job. And she also had a business that she was managing. And so 2 weeks later, I'm back in the same grocery store, $187. Same bill, or same system happens. I hand my bank card, decline, credit card, decline, credit card, decline. Bank manager takes me aside, legit. Bank manager comes up to me, puts his arm around, or bank manager, a store manager comes and legit puts his arm around me. And he's like, dude, I see you here all the time. Saw you here a couple of weeks ago. And we're in the middle of the recession, or at the end of it, right? It goes bad. And the store manager comes up to me. He's like, listen, just come back and pay us when you can. And I left that night, and I called my accountant. It was like 11 o'clock at night. I called my accountant, who I'm really good friends with. I called my lawyer, who I'm really good friends with. And I'm like, guys, I'm going bankrupt. Like, I'm legit a month away from going bankrupt. And that was the second scariest time of my life, where it's like, holy fuck, everything's going to fall apart. I don't have everything in control. And I think that's kind of ties into this podcast really, really well, because now it's like, how do you build this portfolio so that doesn't happen? Now, that situation, that example of the Safeway experience, to me, that's a marriage. In 2015, my wife and I almost got divorced because we were all business. We didn't have the structure and the separation from the two. you know, there's so many people, I see so many people building this business that, you know, what they don't know what it's going to be like in 10 years. They don't forward think 10 years or 15 years from now. They're just so worried about buying a house. Buying a house is easy. It's so easy to buy one houses. Anybody can buy one or two or three houses. But how do you get to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, build wealth, but also have a super, super fuck yeah relationship and a fuck yeah life? That's the challenge.
Yeah. Day at a time, eh? Like, you know, it's for me, you know, it's interesting, right? You feel like you got a handle on stuff.
Yep.
And every once in a while things come off the rails. That's part of life. And how do you get all the systems in place to kind of safeguard against the shit that's coming down? Because you know you're gonna have to deal with stuff. And so let's get into some of the technical stuff. Like what obviously you're gonna do an inspection before you buy. You're gonna earmark a bunch of items. You're gonna say, okay, well, kind of look at it like a strata would, right? So you have a contingency reserve set up. Yeah, your roof is going to be done in 10 years. Like, how do you walk us through how you're going to maintain the asset? And, you know, it can go to hell in a handbasket by buying the wrong property, but can also go sideways in a real hurry if the tenants are wrong. And I've done both.
Yeah. So I think a lot of that comes with the beginning. Like the beginning isn't putting an offer in, you know, the beginning is clearly defining what kind of property that you want. So, or, you know, yeah, really what kind of property, what kind of product you want, maybe is the best phrase. So back in 2003, I went back and I said, okay, I'm going to go buy. No one ever told me otherwise. No one was giving me guidance. I was trying to figure this all out by myself. I was part of a real estate group, big room, where you listen to 30, you know, a speaker go up for 30, 35, 40 minutes. But that's what I've realized now, 20 years later, is that speaker, you know, they're not given enough time to be able to dive deep into the mud and tell me all the problems. They're just surface touching things on the surface that makes it sound like rainbows, lollipops, and sunshine. And then I'm left to fill in the gap. Like that's where the problems happen with these big groups. Speaking of which, at the end of this, I want you to ask me about my small group. I'm creating a small group mastermind. It's going to be fucking rad.
Is that the dude? The Brotherhood of the Dude?
No, I have it.
That's
no,
the one I want to be a part of.
No, the
Dude
badass,
Brotherhood.
yeah, the badass Brotherhood of the Amazing Dude. I've come up with this concept that it's a small group real estate training program. It's gonna be fucking rad. Anyways, so back in 2003, I had this idea that I'm gonna go buy houses that were 10 to 15 years old. And the reason why 10 to 15 years old is because they weren't as much money as the newer stuff. So I got a cost break. I never thought further than that. I'm like, oh, it's a cost break. And it still had, at that point in time, what I thought had wow factor. So in 2007, maybe about 2010, 2011, I started going on stages and I come up with this term wow factor. And others have since used it. But wow factor is like you walk into the house, it's like, wow, this is nice. You know, you want the tenant to step back and say, wow, this is great. So I was buying these houses that were 10, 12 years old, that were cheaper than the newer stuff, and they still had wow factor. So I bought these houses and they were cash flowing $100 a month, $50 a month, $200 a month. And that was all great until 2008 comes. So, and this is going to answer your question here in a second, Joel, on how to determine the steps. Okay. And I still think it all goes back to understanding your product. If you're buying a house that is 10 to 12 years old, what I didn't know, what no one told me, was water tanks only last 10 to 12 years. Roofs only last 20, 25 years, depending on how much sun they hit. They can actually last less than that. Furnaces last 20 to 25 years. The newer ones, the high efficiency ones, last a little bit longer now. But back in the day, these mid efficiency furnaces, or the old school ones, were lasting like 15 to 18 years. So all of a sudden I went and bought these houses for a discount, what I thought was a discount. But the reality was 5 years later, I was feeding these things like crazy, doing improvements. So then 5 years later, that house is now 17 years old, 15 to 17 years old, it now loses its wow factor, which means the tile is outdated. The countertops are outdated because they're just trends change. I didn't know that. I didn't know trends change. I didn't know millennials are going to show up and want everything in fucking granite and they want stainless steel and they want high end this. I didn't know that. No one told me that. So now I think when people go to buy a house, I think they have to sit there and say, how much time do they want to put into that? How much money do they want to put into it over the next 10 years? How much energy do they want to put into thinking about the stuff that needs to be happen, or that stuff that needs to happen? And how many calls do they want to take on the maintenance of the property? And once they understand, so what I'm suspecting is most people are going to come back and say, well, I don't want to do any maintenance. I don't want to put any money into it. I don't want to have any phone calls, so on and so on, which means every time they say, I don't want to, the price goes up for the purchase price.
Yeah. Right.
So, because now you have to buy a house that is complete, it needs renovated, new roof, new furnaces. So all your long-term expenses are taken care of. So the other mind fuck that people go through is they'll sit there and say, well, I can go, this is what I went through. I don't go through it anymore, but I deal with clients all the time who go through this. They'll sit there and say, well, I can go get this 10 to 12-year-old house for $400,000. Now, whoever's listening to this, these numbers are going to be different depending on the area you're in. If you're in the Okanagan, it's 700. If you're in Alberta, it's 350. If you're in, Ontario, it's probably 800, depending on where you're at. So just use my numbers as an example. So someone's going to sit there and say, I can go buy this 10 to 15-year-old house for $400,000, or I can go buy this fully renovated house for $500,000. Well, that's $100,000. Well, it's not. It's only $20,000. Because the bank's going to make you put 20% down of that 100. You don't put $100,000 down, you put 20% of it. So you're going to get a new furnace, new roof, new windows, new water tank, new flooring, new kitchen, updated everything for 20 grand. So, so I think so. So I didn't know this at the time. So I think, Joel, where it starts is like, we can get into the offers, which we will, but I think it starts at the beginning of how much involvement do you want? What kind of headaches do you want? How much time are you willing to put into it? And that's going to decide what kind of product you buy.
Yeah. If you're planning on holding something for 10 years, you may as well, you're buying value, right?
I would go
what you pay, value is what you get.
I agree with you 100%. I would actually have an investor look at it differently. I would have an investor say, what if I have to sell this in 5 years? Not if I'm going to hold on to this. Because most investors come in like, I'm going to hold on to this for 25 years. Well, that's the wrong way to play the game. In my opinion, I play the game a little bit differently. So if once again, going back to that house that I bought that was 15 years old back in 2003, I bought that thinking it had wow factor. It still had some life expectancy and some stuff. So I saw value in that. 5 years later, if I went to sell that house, a future buyer saw no value in that stuff because the furnace is outdated, the water tank's outdated, the roof's outdated, the windows are outdated, the kitchen. So all of a sudden, when I go to sell the house, they're grinding me on price because all the big ticket items are fucked. They're outdated. So if a client is buying a house or an investor is buying a house, the question I'd be saying is, what if I had to sell this in 5 years? How am I going to sell it? Will I get screwed on the sale? Am I going to get grinded? Because there's value in buying a house that has all this longevity. Because if you need to sell it in 5 years, no one's going to grind you on a furnace price.
Yeah. And it comes to your strategy too, right? So if it's a 5 or a 10 or a 15-year play, that's your goal going in. But all of a sudden, something crazy with like what's happened in the Okanagan, it's gone straight up. You maybe want to take some cream off, and now you got to be in flux, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you a wow factor. We had property on Lakeshore Road in Vernon, and we didn't do any inspections on these because it was a land assembly as a tear down. So now it's just coming to fruition. Now there's a 5-story build going on it. So about the same time shit was hitting the fan for you, it was hitting the fan for me.
Mhm.
And I was living in one of those houses, and I was talking to Caravest Capital, trying to pitch them on why this would be a good deal to hold a mortgage on. Well, I'm in the basement of this piece of shit. The sump pump is going on and off, and there's a fucking mouse running around on the floor. Anyways, people may think different about me, but I lambasted this poor little bugger, and he hit the wall, and that was the end of that poor little guy. And so your strategy is going to be different for what you think you're going to do to invest, right? And so at first I thought buying cheap was the silver bullet, right?
Yeah.
I'm not buying cheap anymore. I'm buying value. I don't want bad tenants calling me. I don't want repairs and maintenance. I don't want to deal with any of that stuff at this point in my investor cycle. And so for me, like I'm with you 100%. I would you know, it used to be where you could get 1,200 up in the Okanagan and 1,000 down. That was in Vernon. That's where it capped out. Everything has gone so bonkers that the top floors of houses now can easily rent for 2,200.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Basement suites are going for 1,500, 1,600, and these are this is stuff that I wouldn't even live in.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so we're all the numbers, all the metrics, and everything is different. And so it's like you said, you got to know where you are, what you're buying, but the deferred maintenance.
But all the concepts are the same. You know, like I don't care if you're buying in Okanagan. I don't care if you're buying in Edmonton. I don't care if you're buying in Ontario. All the concepts, all the fundamentals are the same. You know, like you still have to decide what kind of product are you buying, how much maintenance do you want to do. You know, what people need to understand is, you know, go back to your example of that shitbox that you're living in. That person who bought that house potentially, I don't know this to be true, but I see this a lot with investors, potentially couldn't afford to fix it because there's different money, there's different ways to fix it. If you buy it at the start already complete, the bank's going to finance it, essentially. When you buy a shit house for cheap, and you buy this house thinking that nothing's going to happen, when that stuff shows up, you legit have to reach into your pocket. You legit have to reach into your pocket and start pulling out money and fucking just throwing it out the window because you can't finance those repairs. So it's after pocket or after out of pocket money or bank money that you're going to use to finance it. So what investors typically tend to do is they cheap out on a purchase because they think they're going to get a deal, but then they don't have a reserve fund to be able to fix stuff as stuff shows up.
Yeah,
that's the loophole. That's the catch, right?
Yeah, and you've got the discipline that you've had and the track record that you've done it. Like that's where you're a lot further ahead in the investment game than I am because I made that mistake.
Yeah.
And so I was going higher risk, higher reward, land assembly, trying a development site, thinking I was gonna be a cajillionaire. And I'm 40 as of a couple of weeks ago, and I'm doing just fine. But I would definitely do things differently, and it wouldn't have been as sexy. Maybe it would have been houses with suites and very disciplined on the cash flow and not jumping in early and being patient. And so, you can go and you can get a great house. I had a client, and this poor lady, her son, convinced her that, getting rich in real estate could be the vehicle. And so buys a beautiful house, not too far from me. And then they screwed up big time on the tenant. And so there was a grow up in there.
Mm.
And so there's another piece of the puzzle. It doesn't matter what you buy. If you're, like I in that same house that I was telling you about, one time, this is 2008. So we're 2021. It's a long time ago. And so I'm out of this house now, thank God. And I got someone else in there, and there's 6 suites in this land assembly down there. And the girl I was with at the time, we were going camping. I just wanted to get on the road that the vehicle was packed. It's time to go, and I see this guy to go in there, and I'm gonna rent it to him. He said, go to his job. I don't get him to fill anything out. I figure out, who cares? It's a tear down house anyways. It's no one really wants to live in it. And so I was hasty. He gave me the heebie-jeebies, but I gave it to him anyway. And fast forward a couple of months, rent's not being paid. And he calls me one day and he says, my dog got hit by a car. Can you give me $40 for the visiting vet? And being the kind soul that I am, I gave him $40. And then, which was a mistake, because then the next day was another story, and then it was another story. I said, Matt, you've got this wrong. I am the landlord. You're the tenant. You're supposed to be paying me. So with this guy, he had a drug issue, and I had to get a bailiff, right? It was like, I've had to get a bailiff only 2 times. Like, usually you can pay them to get them out, or you can, but some people are just so off the rocker. You need a guy that's 6'5" to go knock on the door. In my next life, I want to be one of those guys, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but these are, you've got all the systems with Tilt for credit checks, and you got all this stuff for these people. And I didn't have the patience for some of that. And
yeah, like dude, I get it. That's a funny story. Like, I've never paid a tenant $40 for a vet bill. I've never done that. So that's a new story for me. But to me, it all comes back down to, it still goes back to the beginning. It still goes back to the beginning. Like, what kind of property do I want to have? How much involvement do I want to have in that property? How much maintenance, how much money do I want to spend on that? So the nicer the product, the better the tenant. Okay. So that's rule number one. Rule number two is, when it comes to the management of the stuff, it's like, where people make the mistakes, and I see it all the time, is they think they can do it themselves. I'm a good judge of character, and I'm sure you are, Joel. Like, fuck, you have me on the podcast, so you must be a good judge of character, right? But where people make the mistakes, it's like, oh, I'm a good judge of character, and that's true. You probably are, just not when you're financially on the hook for something. When you're financially on the hook for something, that's where mistakes start happening, because that's where emotions kick in, and all of a sudden, it's like, oh yeah, no, I'm going to take a chance on this guy. Oh no, it doesn't feel good. Like, my gut says no, but you know what? I need the money. I don't want this to sit vacant. Oh, I'm going camping. I just want this thing fucking rented. I don't want the headache. So then we make irrational decisions because we're emotionally attached, or emotionally motivated, or emotionally scared, whatever it is. And all of a sudden we make this decision that we know that I wouldn't have made, for example, as a third party.
Yeah.
So, I think if everyone gets clear at the start, like, and I often use the saying, slow down to speed up. Buying a house is easy. Buying the right house at the right time for the right amount for the long-term success is hard. That's the hard part. And we're starting to see it right now. We're seeing it in the Okanagan. I'm sure you're seeing it, Joel. I'm seeing it here in Kelowna. I'm seeing it in Edmonton now. I'm seeing it in the GTA, out in Toronto, in the Lower Mainland. FOMO, fear of missing out. Yeah. Fear of missing out is purely driven by emotion. There's this energy that's like, oh my God, I'm going to miss out if I don't do this. Oh my God, so-and-so, my neighbor just made $200,000. I better go do this. So that's when bad decisions start being made, whether it's buying the wrong house, renting to the wrong tenant, doing the wrong repairs, whatever it is. So I still feel all of our viewers, all of your viewers, anyone, the 3 people that are listening to this podcast, which is us 3.
Yeah.
We're going to listen to it 100. We're going to listen to it 1,000 times, so it becomes number 1, the 3 of us. And no, but all honesty, like, I think all the listeners, they have to go back to the beginning, and here's where it starts. Here's the type of product. This type of product's going to attract this type of user. This type of product's going to attract this type of user or tenant. And then here's the flight path. And then when it comes time to find a tenant to help mitigate your experience, Joel, what you could have done is went to Jordan and said, listen, dude, I'm super busy. I'm super like, I want to go camping, but I got to run something by you really quick. I just found this tenant. Here's what he does. Here's what he, I haven't done any credit checks on him. I haven't called his references. My gut says I don't like this guy, but I'm thinking of renting to him. What do you think? Of course, Jordan's going to come back and say, dude, are you fucking crazy? Don't do that. But your mind will convince you that it's such a good idea at the time and it makes total sense and you can manage it. But so what I encourage everyone to do is, I get busyness. I get the desire to fill places, and I get the FOMO of missing out on money and opportunity. But slow down. Sometimes slowing down speeds you up, and reach out to get a third party opinion.
Yeah.
Could you imagine Joel calling Jordan up and saying, hey, Jordan, I'm thinking about, remember that house I bought? I got this suite, and, I got this guy, and I'm just heading out to go camping. He wants to rent it. He's driving a piece of shit car. He has no teeth. I think he's smoking like a dope in the car. I'm not really sure, but I think he is. I don't have time to do a credit check. I don't know if he has a job, but I think I'm going to rent to him. Jordan, what do you think? Right? What would you say, Jordan?
Are you out of your mind?
Not a fucking chance.
Forget about it.
Yeah, it's just like no different if I called you, Joel. Like, you're a smart guy, better. If I were to call you up and say, hey, Joel, listen, I'm just, my car's packed. My Chris and I are heading to the camping. My car's packed. I got this tenant. I'm thinking about renting it. He has no job. He has no teeth. He has no car, whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to rent to him. What do you think? You would tell me no. But
yeah,
yet,
absolutely.
But yet you rented to him. You know what I mean? Like, that's why it's so important to bring in a third opinion, an outside opinion that can kind of keep you unemotionally attached.
You could have saved a mouse's life, Joel.
Yeah, it's
Totally.
true. It's
Yeah.
true.
But even when you go to buy a house, like I would even implement that same strategy on the purchases. So now back up, so now we've narrowed down to the two different types of product that you want, that, two different quality of product. Then there's the condo, then there's the townhouse, the single family house, suited house, apartments. So then that two different quality of houses or product can be separated into each category. Okay. So I would even go one step further. Before I went to buy a house or a condo, or whatever it is, I would go back to somebody and say, hey, Joel, like, listen, I'm thinking about buying a house like this. And here's my math of the house, assuming it's a rental property that everyone's looking to buy. Here's the math of this house. Here's the purchase price. Here's, there's 4 or 5 properties that have sold on the market. Here's a projected pro forma. Here's the sale price. Here's all the numbers I'm using. Here's my mortgage. Here's my taxes, utilities, vacancy, repairs and maintenance, all this contingency, all this stuff. What do you think about this idea, Joel? It's going to cash flow $22 a month. So now what I'm doing is I'm trying to find ways to separate take my emotion out of the transaction, so that when something shows up, I can make a quick decision, educated decision with little to no fear and little to no risk.
Yeah.
So there's some stuff that people can do ahead of time that don't shoot them in the foot 10 years from now, or when the market shifts, because the market will shift, guys. Like there's a couple areas, times in the future that are coming that could drop the market. A change in interest rates, a change in personal taxes, inflation could go through the roof, property taxes. Like, there's a lot of variables that are at play right now. So if I send you this pro forma, Joel or Jordan or whoever I send it to, and it's $22, and you come back and say, yeah, dude, I get it, nice house, but to me, this house looks like it's 15 years old, and you're going to need this and this and this. Like, where's that money coming from? So it just allows different dialogue and conversation for me to go fine tune my numbers to narrow down even tighter the type of product that I'm going to buy. You as a realtor now, Joel, want me to do that, I feel, because now if I've narrowed it down to this type of property, now that type of property comes up, boom, there's my offer. I'm crystal clear on all of my math ahead of time. I can go $20,000 over list if I need to, and I know all of my numbers are in alignment.
Yeah.
I know what my long-term costs are. I know what my long-term tenant is. I know how long I'm going to hold on to that property, and it works. Where people make the mistake is FOMO kicks in, and they start fucking just randomly throwing darts at places hoping to hit something.
Yeah, and I'm baffled by what's happening, and it I built my whole business on, and I'm a lot better at it than when I started, because you sometimes you got to chase a buck. You don't have one. But my whole shtick is I give people the best advice that I can, no matter what the situation is. So like, don't get me wrong, I'm very good at a call to action and getting people to make a decision, but convincing people to buy as an investment into this type of market, when I'm going to be selling as much as I can and putting it all in the bank and sitting on cash, is it's what are we doing moving forward here? And I want to ask you a question. What if the wise guys were to do a JV with Jared Hope and we were looking at an apartment building in Edmonton?
Mhm.
What would that look like? I think that there's a lot of people that have had 15, 20 rentals, but have never kind of been able to get the traction that you've done.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm being dead serious with this question here. If we were to do something like that,
I wouldn't buy an apartment building. I don't, I own a couple apartment buildings and I don't like them. Everyone's all hot and horny for these fucking apartment buildings. And I don't understand, I don't understand why. So first of all, you go to buy an apartment building, you have to put 25 or 30% down. So on $1 million, you have to put $250,000 to $300,000 down. The qualifying is different. Sure, you're qualifying the building first, and then you second. In a residential, you're qualifying yourself first, building second. So, but that $300,000 for $1 million product, you can go buy $1.5 million of houses, for example. So you're going to get a higher total asset base versus the apartment building. Number one, your cash flow on an apartment building, $1 million, which you can't find in anywhere, $1 million, it's probably going to be like 1.5. But your cash flow on that building is going to be like $1,200-ish a month. You're going to get a building that is extremely run down. Everything is old. Your cost to repair, it's going to be like, you're going to have to be doing windows and kitchens. It's going to cost you 20 to 25 grand on tenant turnover just to bring up the quality of unit. So your cost to maintain the buildings are so high. The other problem that happens is the management of a building is really, really hard. And I use this analogy of, what happens to number one happens to number 25 or 35, 3 floors up. So if number one farts, number 35 smells it, essentially. So
nice.
Because they all talk, they all gossip. And so if the whole building is $1,250 for rent, okay, every unit's $1,250, and all of a sudden there's a correction in the market, and I have to take one unit who's thinking about moving or is fallen upon tough times, or there's a divorce or a death, and I have to give them a break, that rent goes from $1,250 to $1,100. The whole building within 60 days is $1,100. The whole building's like domino effect, because everyone's talking, hey, you're giving unit number one $1,100, I want $1,100. Okay, so right. That's instant. Like people don't talk about this shit. Like that legit fucking happens. And then you have someone who moves in and they bring in bed bugs. Well, those bed bugs don't stay in one unit, guys. I'm going to live in unit 3. They go to unit 4, they go to unit 5, they go up the wall into into unit 12, they go up the wall to unit 23 or 33. So all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're spending 10 grand on bed bug treatment every year. And then you want to sell the building. You know how hard it is to sell a building? It's hard because your fish pool is so small that there's not everybody that can buy it, because not everyone has $350,000 kicking around. Whereas you go buy 3 or 4 single family houses, one, if you get into financial trouble, you have to sell that whole fucking building. You have to dump the whole building in order to get out. And then people will come back and say, yeah, but it's one roof, it's one boiler system, it's one this. Well, you know how much a roof costs on an apartment building? Like anywhere from $35,000 to $50,000. You know how much a roof costs for me to change on a house? $5 grand. But I don't have to do all 4 houses. I might have to do one out of those 3 or 4 houses that I bought if I deployed that money into single family. If I get into financial trouble and I need to sell something, I can just take one house, sell it. I can put it on the market. So if I ever need to liquidate a house, I can just liquidate it like that. I can sell it just like that. I can lower my price. I can move one product. Maybe if I have to move 2 product, I can move 2 product versus having to dump a whole apartment building. So I get everyone's all hot and horny and all excited about these apartments, but I have a couple. I've sold one. I have a couple left, or I don't like them. They're, as far as like let's put it this way, Tilt, our management company, we manage 600 properties, and I don't manage any apartment buildings. They're just too hard. There's no money. There's high turnover, high cost of repair. My rents fluctuate too much. Now, obviously this is my opinion. Like you can go talk to other people who love apartment buildings and they'll rave about them, and that's fine. And so my point of this, I think my point would be, pick your lane and stay in it. And my lane is single family houses with basement suites. My lane is an 8 to 10 year window, 8 to 10 year hold. My lane is not commercial. My lane is not multifamily. Everybody thinks that, oh, I'm gonna get a couple of residentials, and then I'm going to apartment buildings. I need an apartment building. That's the cream of the crop. It's not. Stay in your lane. And Warren Buffett has said before, I've read it, where he says, put all your eggs in one basket and just nurture the shit out of that basket. Take care of that basket. Heat the eggs and grow like take care of everything. Watch it like a hawk. Well, hawks don't watch eggs; they'll eat the chickens. But the point is, like, just become an expert in one thing. Buying a multi is a totally different game than buying a single family. So if the wise guys, if you guys were to come up to me and say, hey, listen, we have 200 grand, what can we do with it? I would be like, yeah, we're going to go buy 2 suited houses. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's the cash flow we're going to get. We're going to hold on to these things for 8 years. We're going to watch the market in 8 years from now. Then we're going to decide if we're going to sell it or keep it. We're not refinancing. We're going to sell it or keep it. If we keep it, we're going to break those next 8 years into 2 4-year segments. So we're going to reevaluate at the 4-year mark for the next 8 years to decide if we're going to keep it or sell it. And then we're going to come up with a tipping point. Here's the tipping, I don't know if you want to say a tipping point or a breaking point, where it's like, okay, we've made enough money. Let's take some off the table. But that all gets talked about now versus in the moment, where people make the mistake is pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. So everyone gets out thinking, oh, I'm just going to be a pig. I'm just going to make a little bit of money. I just want to make this. But then once you start making this, it's like, oh, the market's hot. I can make more. I want to make more. So then that's when they turn from a pig to a hog. And then that's when they get slaughtered. So the mistake that I've made with all my JVs is it's like, okay, first of all, they're all 5-year terms, big mistake. Now I do 10 to 12-year terms. And, it's like, okay, in 5 years, we're going to do this and this and this. And then 5 years from now, the market's so hot, everyone wants to stay in. So right. Because they think it's endless. Oh my God, it's endless. When what I should have done is I should have said, okay, when we hit X, we're out. No matter what, we're out. I'm going to you're going to get your money back. I'm going to make some money. You're going to make some money. And when we hit here, we're out. And if it goes to here, great for somebody else. Let them make money, but we have no risk. And if you guys came and said you have 200 grand, for example, we'd go buy 2 houses in 8 years. Maybe we sell one, pull some money off, keep one. Like, there's different ways to play the game, but I don't know about apartment buildings, guys. I stay away from them. I don't like them.
Yeah, well, I love how you in your lane analogy, and it's a blessing and a curse doing what I do, selling this stuff, because I'm all over the map. I sold a convenience store last week. I sold 2 condos. I looked at a property before we got on our call this morning where it's stagnant at the city because you should be able to cut a lot off the front, but they're getting away from doing it on this street because it's in a lane. And so am I a real estate expert, or am I just good at knowing a bunch of, you know what I mean? you've got this crazy traction by staying in your lane. And
but you're different than me. Like, I'm not an agent,
yeah,
so
exactly.
you have to wear different hats. And
Yeah.
like earlier you were saying that, how, what I think you were alluding to, and maybe I was reading into this a little bit, but it's like, how do I sell somebody a $700,000 house or a $700,000 product when, one, I might be selling out, or I just don't know, I don't actually believe that works. And and so my belief is, if I were a realtor or selling a product, I still believe today's a good time to be buying. Like, I think with the interest rates as low as they are, with the opportunity, with the I think the Okanagan is a phenomenal place for appreciation. I think that's rad too. I think there's a lot of areas of concern that people have to be watching out for, a lot of red flags, a lot of barriers that could potentially show up. But that doesn't mean it's a bad time to be buying. And I also think that everyone's at different stages of the game, so just because I'm selling some of my portfolio doesn't mean you shouldn't be buying. We're at different stages. Like, I'm 20, I'm 19 years in, I'm getting ready to transition out. I'm still acquiring, but I'm also taking some of the stuff that I've had for 10, 15 years. I'm starting to move it out. Like, I'm just done with it. It's time to take some chips off the table. Whereas someone who's just starting out, it's like, okay, buy based on market fundamentals versus the house right now. Buy based on future GDP growth, future unemployment growth, future opportunity, future, watch the employment job sector. Because that's going to give you some structure and stability, that if the market does something in the world, that this area is going to be isolated. So I would have no problem selling a fucking $700,000 house to somebody if it was in the right city that had the right fundamentals that's going to give them long-term success.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's a tremendous time to buy if you tick all the right boxes, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's a brutal time to buy, in my opinion, if you're gonna buy something that's negative cash flow, $1,000 a month in the Okanagan, and have to feed it. That would be ludicrous. And so part of what we're trying to do with these podcasts is give the best advice we can, right?
Yeah, totally.
And that's why we're on here. We think we've learned some stuff along the way, and you specialize in a different area, and that's why we're sharing it.
Yeah.
And it's the beginning and the end. So what's the end game? And that just got to tie into your purchase decision. And you need the fundamentals, like we've been hammering on every single one of these pods we've ever done, right?
Yeah.
And so it's this is the extraordinary club of the dudes, can I say?
Brotherhood of the amazing dudes, buddy. That's what it's called.
So you guys have done a really good job of, kind of painting the picture on both sides of the fence of, I mean, what's the opposite of a lemon? Is it a cherry? So what a lemon, what a lemon looks like, what a cherry looks like. If you guys are to summarize in it, just in one sentence, or maybe, the top 3 things of what to look out for, watch out, that's probably a lemon. If you could summarize that, and then maybe on the flip side, yeah, that looks like it's a cherry. That looks pretty sweet. What are like maybe the main thing, or the 3 main things that stick out? Just like, yeah, this checks my first initial boxes.
Should I go?
Yeah, go.
Let me go, man. I got this. Okay, the first house I ever bought was 4215 15th Street, I think, in Vernon, 2005, October 31st. I didn't know a thing, but it had a house with a suite. I'm a Calgary kid. I was in Vancouver. I didn't want to be in Vancouver. We moved to the Okanagan. It was a June day, 35 degrees, coming over Bella Vista. The cherry blossoms are out, or everything was in bloom. I was just like awestruck. It was like, this place is going off, and it is today. So I'm kind of like the oracle, I figure. Just kidding. So, but this house,
you're the Joracle.
That's right. So this was a lemon that I bought, but it didn't matter because it was 2005, and we had another 3 great years of appreciation. But I did everything wrong. what looking at houses day in and day out, it's like looking at cars. And so if you see the trim is shit, and you see all like the finishing work in the house, if there's corners cut and it's a do-it-yourself hack job, you should probably be taking a closer look at what's behind the walls, because if someone hasn't fixed what's right there in front of you, that's a big red flag to me. And same with cars or boats or whatever, right? If someone's going to take the time to get all the schmag off the side of their boat, buff it out, and wipe off the leather, they've probably done meticulous work on the engine and done all the servicing and whatever, right? So when I bought this place, there was like the drywall on the ceiling in the basement was like waffled. It was like it went through an earthquake or something, but I was stupid enough to buy the house. And we took the drywall down. Cosmetically, it was my decision. It looked like shit, so I figured let's do something with this. And so we kind of renovated. I didn't know what I was doing, but we took the ceiling down, and there was aluminum wire and with no moret shoved into the drywall, just like not even like twisted together, just like wrapped like haphazardly or whatever you want to call it, like this into the drywall. And it was all black. So like how this house never burnt down, I'll never know. So now all of a sudden all the ceiling comes down, right? So you got to pull the whole thing down because we don't want to, fry to death. And so that was, but you can't look. That's would be in real estate lingo for an agent. That's a material latent defect. And so they never disclosed it. What am I? My recourse? Sorry, Joel. Yeah. The reality is that all it's going to fall back on your shoulders. You're responsible. And I've come full circle where I don't buy junk anymore. I'd rather pay more, like what you were talking about earlier, where I don't have to worry about doing this and 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 this. I'm going to get an inspection, even if I think it's top-notch place. Like you're going to find little things in that inspection. Like we had this house I'm in now. There's something called a condensate line that comes off your air conditioner.
Furnace.
Furnace. And so it's all part of the same system. And so when I bought the house, we thought it was the hot water tank. There was a little pool of Freon or whatever the hell it is. I'm not sure what comes out of these things. And so the plumber comes in, a small fix, you loop it out through, you get it out of you drain it, right? It goes down. I think you put it into the washing machine, like wherever it goes. And so, it's all a learning experience, and but the big thing for me is just to get in the market, learn something, try things, but don't jump in just to jump in. You got an end game in mind. You want to make a few bucks, and you want to be happy, and you don't want to have a bunch of surprises. And take it away, Jared.
Yeah. So I think the question was, how do you find a cherry? Like, what's a cherry, right?
Yeah. Well, what are the instant red flags of, oh, that's probably a lemon, and then the opposite? That looks like it might be a cherry.
Yeah, like I love Joel's story, because what he highlights is there's just stuff you don't know. Like you can't see it. There's no way he would have been able to see the moret in the ceiling and the burn mark. Like I got stories like that too. And I look back, as Joel's talking, I'm like, how could I have mitigated that risk? Like even a home inspector wouldn't have seen that. Right. And, but there are things like I walked through a house once, this guy, funny enough, my old plumber, I had this plumber who worked for me for a number of years on my flips, on my renos. And then next thing you know, he's no longer working for me. He quit. And then we walked it, because every house that hits the market that's a comparable to mine, I'm in it. Like we go inspect every house because I want to know what my competition is doing. So I walk into this house, and sure enough, I see Jeff, my old plumber, there. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing here? Oh, this is my reno. And I'm like, oh, sweet. Good for you. Good for you. And internally I'm like, go fuck yourself. Like, you're a rental, like you're stealing my shit, right? Like, fuck off. But a nice enough guy, whatever. And anyway, and he's asking the same price as mine. And as we walk through, like the laminate and the door jamb, like one of the places, like if I see new laminate on the ground, the first place I look for is I go to the doors. And around the door, how there's the door comes out, and then you have the little the track on the door. So you have to really finely cut that laminate to make it fit. Most people, if it's a poor job, there's gaps all over the place, and then they take this filler and plug the filler, like this crayon or this putty, and they put this putty inside to fill the cracks. So anyways, I go walk, I look at the floor, and it like the craftsmanship, the attention to detail is so poor, because there's like seriously half-inch gaps where it's just full of putty or caulking, and then it's stained. Like they take a marker that matches the floor and they stain it. And I'm like, okay, if they didn't take the time to do that, what else have they cut the corner? So then I lifted up the trays, the metal
Vents.
the floor vents, the heat vents. I lift up the heat vent, and then I look at the laminate and the floor, because I want to see how, because that's how you tell where, because you can't see it just looking at, like, I got laminate in my house here, in my carriage house. I can't tell if this is 12 millimeter laminate, 7 millimeter laminate. I can't tell what it was installed on. I have no idea. But if you lift up the floor vents, you can actually see what it's on top of. So then I use 12 millimeter laminate. I use a water resistant laminate for example, whereas this guy was using like a cheap 99-cent laminate from Home Depot. On the surface, it looks the same because I can't tell the difference, but the quality is different. So I'll look at that. I'll look into the furnace room and I'll start watching, I'll look at the furnace room and see, are all the, is it sealed off properly? I'll look at the panel and see if is it labeled, like just little things like that. Really, if it's a good renovator, all this stuff's going to be labeled. All the water lines are labeled. Like, that's someone who pays attention to detail. And so if they pay attention to the little things, that means the rental's probably in good shape. And then I would proceed to the next step. So anyways, back to this guy. So I walk through this house and I see the doors are different. He kept the existing doors. So he does this big reno, but he keeps the old school flat panel doors, like the flat old wood doors that he just sanded and painted over. The problem with those wood doors is if down the road a tenant puts a hole through one, I can't fix that, because they have this little grain look to them. So if a tenant put a hole through the wall, I could patch it, but now the whole door has a grain look to it, but this patch mark is flat. So then I have to go replace a door. So if I go to replace a door with a new door that's 30 years old compared to a door that's 30 years old, the quality isn't the same. So now I have 7 doors in the house that match and 1 that doesn't. So all of a sudden the quality starts separating, right? And no one thinks about this. So anyway, so I'm walking through this guy's house. He was asking $465 for his. I asked $460 at this time. I was asking $465 for mine. They're now $485. And I actually used this guy's house because his house sat on the market for 3 months. I used this guy's house to sell my next 5 houses. So we would take a client, swear to God, we would take a client who was thinking about buying one of my houses, show them my house, take them to his house, show them all of the deficiencies, and bring them back to my house and show how we didn't have any. And they'd be like, I want to buy yours. They could have got his for $15,000 less probably, but they wanted mine because everything, the attention to detail was there. So that's really what I would do, is if I was walking into a house and I was trying to separate, like you walk into all these houses that are renovated, it's like little things like the granite. So are they using granite, or are they using, you can get a product that's just a granite cover, like a film that goes over top. It's not real granite. It looks like granite from the outside. It's like, oh, that's granite. But as you get closer, it's like really that thin versus 1.5 inches thick. What kind of taps do they use? If they're using American Standard taps, which is the cheapest taps you can buy, or are they using Moen? Okay, well, Moens are a little bit more money. Moens have lifetime warranty on that product. So it's little things like that. Like what most renovators do is they buy a house, they create a budget for the house, and then they try to come under budget. And in order to come under budget, the more they come under budget, the more profit they have. The more profit they have, the bigger win it is for them. So in order for them to come under budget, they have to cheap out on floor, they have to cheap out on appliances, they have to cheap out on countertops and taps and fixtures and all this other stuff, because that's where they get their spread. That's where they get their lift. So those are just some of the things that I'd quickly be looking for if I was walking through a house.
Yeah, man, beautiful. That's exactly it, man. It's I got a buddy / client who's built 1,500 homes in Kelowna, K West, and he built 53 houses at Gallagher's Canyon. And he hit this so good, man. He was buying lots in there for like 110 a pop. Like it was
Wow.
That was grand slam, man. And so, but his showroom, his show houses, you go in, and first impression you go in is heated floor, right? So you take off your shoes, and your feet are warm.
That's wow factor. This is all wow factor.
Yeah, each little area you go into, it's like the greatest fridge of the times, right? It was the first time they ever had the fridge with the pull out crisper drawer for your lettuce, and then the sink with the special thing just to fill up the pot. Yeah, and so you have the little wow thing in each one. He spends more money to build, but he gets a higher price per square foot than everybody. And the people that can see value and the people that got money appreciate it, understand it, and they will buy it. And the same thing goes for the rentals.
Yeah, like my flips, our turnkey suited houses that we sell in Edmonton, I'm selling them for $480. Everyone else is $450 to $465. There's one on the market for $465 right now. And I have thought many times, like so many times over the last 11 years, that I need to be $465. I don't. In order for me to be $465 or $450, I can't put in sump pumps. I can't fix the eaves troughs. I have to go with a cheaper laminate that's not water resistant. I have to go. I can't maybe put in a newer, bigger water tank. I can't do the roof or windows. Like I have to cut stuff out, and which is fine for some people. Like if they want to do that, that's fine. But to the end user, all of my clients want a set return every year. They don't want to be having to worry about their house flooding. Like you can go buy a house for $450, whereas mine's $480, 30 grand more. That house, you're not going to get warranty. The grading's not complete. The eaves troughs are not done. The downspouts are redirecting into the right 2 feet from the house. Like the chances of that thing flooding are high. A flood, for example, if a flood comes in through a basement window, that's called seepage. That is not covered under warranty, or not warranty, insurance. So insurance doesn't cover that. So now this, a client essentially is trying to save $6,000, because once again, it's not 30, it's 6. They're trying to save $6,000 by buying a $450,000 house. That's going to cause $20, $30, $40, $50, $60,000 of headaches down the road. The way we do our business is I keep on telling Colin, who is my manager, who runs all my renos, it's like, no, we're holding course. Like we're selling a top product. I'm not cutting corners just to compete with somebody else who has. You don't like my product? Don't buy it. I'm totally cool with it. If I can't sell it, I will keep it. I'm building these things, renovating these things for me to keep in the event I can't sell it. I will keep every product that I do because I stand by it. It's awesome. Whereas these other houses, I can go find you a house for $450, but holy fuck, that thing might flood in the spring. I have no idea. Yeah. So you really have to be careful when you're buying a renovated product. People need to understand when you buy a renovated product, that renovator is making money on the spread from his budget and how much he can shave off the budget. That's how renovators work. And that's cool. That's totally fine. There's some really great renovators, but they're still making their money off their spread. So they'll buy things on the cheap a lot of times.
Cool. Okay. Well, we should probably wrap things up here. It sounds like just listening to you guys for the last, 20 minutes on the whole lemons versus cherries. that the message is you can't shortcut value.
No.
And if we're talking about, lemons, cherries, and keeping your sanity while you're maintaining portfolios and properties, seems to be is a way to make sure that you don't go crazy. Is don't shortcut value, especially at the beginning, because you can't really. It's going to come back to bite you.
And I would even add this as we sign off. I would even add this, and this is what I was sharing with you, Jordan, before we started the call today, is everyone needs to understand that real estate is like a bus. And if you miss out on a deal, that's fine. If you miss your bus, that's fine. Another bus will come. Another house will come. That's not the last house. If an agent's calling you up saying, "Oh my God, what a great deal," you have to just move slow, stay in your lane, slow down, do all your homework leading up to it. So if a deal comes up, you can act on it quick, but slow down. And if, where people make the mistake is they feel like they're missing out on something, and then they start cutting corners. They buy product that they shouldn't be buying. They don't see the bad finishings. They don't see the lower interest rates. They don't see the shit apartments around the building or around the corner. They start missing things because they feel that's the last house coming for sale ever.
Yeah.
And that's just not true. Like, I've been in this business so long. I've transacted so many deals in hot markets and down markets. And in hot markets, it's more important than ever to realize that if I don't get that house, that's okay. I'll get the one will show up. It might be in 3 months, but I'm still going to get a house. It's okay. I don't need to buy one right this second. I don't need one right now. I just want one. Okay, cool. Well, it might take me 3 months.
Yeah. Don't fall victim to FOMO.
Totally. And it's hard, man. It's so hard. Look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin's like 70 grand.
Bitcoin, Schmidt-coin.
It's
Real
like
estate, Jared.
that's
real estate.
yeah, no, I get it, but that's a classic example of fear of missing out,
Yeah. Okay, so stay tuned for part 3. This is number 2 of 3. Next episode, it's gonna be all horror stories. I think today's topic on keeping your sanity, right? We touched a lot on how to keep your sanity when you're maintaining your own properties. Maybe we didn't really get into the market per se, how to safeguard against the things you don't have control over. Maybe we'll touch on that.
We totally did, man. Slow down. Pay attention to the signs of the reno. Pay attention to the signs of the house. Pay attention to like the surroundings. Pay attention to the market. Like, we talked about all that stuff. We didn't get into. I don't mean to cut you off on your exit, but we didn't necessarily
What's
get
the matter
into
with you? He's the host.
But we didn't necessarily get into the nitty gritty of how to do a deal and all that stuff. But that's easy.
Yeah.
Like what we got into is don't overstep the importance of attention to detail. Like, slow down to speed up. Like, all the stuff that we could have got caught into is what realtors do. Realtors are going to guide you through how to negotiate and who to talk to for mortgages and what terms and conditions to put in, so on and so on. Like, what we talked about is stuff that's not being talked about.
Perfect.
In my humblest opinion.
Yeah, because if the stuff that we may not see is, okay, well, now Ontario's on lockdown. What are they going? Like, we do, that's the whatever. So we do what we can. We control what we can. Have a good time doing it, and life goes on.
Totally, man.
So part 3, horror stories. We'll hone in. I guess before we go, you wanted me to remind you. Tell us about your small group before we jump.
Oh my God. Okay, so I've been in. So this came to me. So I've been running a lot. Like, I run all the time, and as I was running, maybe about a month ago, I'm running, and I come up with this idea. So I used to be part of the Real Estate Investment Network. I was on their stage. I've been on many stages, not just RAIN, but I've been on Right Club. I've been on REAG. I've been on at iWin. I've been at all this stuff. iWin's podcast. And what I've realized is with COVID, so these big groups don't really work. And in my opinion, they didn't work for me, because you'd go listen to a speaker for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. They would talk. They were sharing all the rainbows and lollipops and sunshine stories. They never really got into the nitty gritty. And then you would go to this room, and there'd be 500 people in this room. And of those 500 people, maybe 10 or 15 are where you want to be. Okay. Of that room, like, seriously, legit 2% are there. So then you go to this room trying to network. Good luck trying to find those people. It's impossible. It is impossible. And 9 times out of 10, you're talking to somebody who, you know, if you use that analogy of, you know, you take the 5 people you hang out with, that's who you'll be. You're talking to these people, you're not really going to move, in my opinion. So as I'm running, I'm going to create, we're already in the process of creating it. It's going to be a weekend retreat. So we're going to do a series of weekend retreats. We're going to take 20 people at my house. We're renovating this amazing house on the lake, on Lake Okanagan here in Kelowna. It's 5,000 square feet. It's a $6 million house. It's going to be rad. And we're going to make an event out of it. So it's going to be an experience where we're going to take 20 like-minded people. Everyone gets interviewed. You can only come if you're a like-minded. You don't have to own real estate. You can be a beginner. You can be someone with 10 properties. It doesn't matter. And then the first night's going to be, there's going to be a series of stuff that happens before to get to know everybody. The first night's a social, a workout in the morning, an event, like a hangout at the lake or water ski, surf, whatever it is. Friday night's a social. Saturday, we're going to dive into some real estate. We're going to do some personal development. We're going to do some breath work. We're going to do some workouts. And it's going to be this intimate, small group mastermind real estate education system where we're going to break down everything, just like these podcasts. So what I've realized with these podcasts is we're able to dive deeper into topics but the problem with the podcast is they're only an hour and 10 minutes. So a month later, we'll do another one. A month later, we'll do another one. But if we could do an 8-hour podcast, guys, 1, no one would listen to it. But 2, if we could, do you know, we would move the needle 100 fucking degrees. Whereas every podcast, it's like 1 degree. And then by the next month, the person who's heard it has moved back. So then a month later, they listen to another podcast, a degree. A month later, they move back, a degree, back, a degree, back and forth, right? So if I can get 20 people for 8 hours a day, they come to my house, all the food is taken care of, lunch is taken care of, drinks are taken care of, it's all inclusive. And we're doing deep dives for 3 days. They're going to walk out. I'm going to move that needle from 0. I'm going to move that needle 50 degrees. They might shift back 20. 30 days or 3 months later, we come back. I'm going to move them 50 degrees, move back 20, so on and so on. Like that is how you impact people, not putting them into a room of 500 people and say, hey, go find a friend. No. You're going to come to my house. I'm going to give you a friend. I'm going to make you interact with people. I'm going to show you this business from this level of how we're talking on this podcast for 3 fucking days. It's going to be rad. Anyways, that's coming out. We're gonna launch that end of August. It's gonna be rad.
That sounds awesome. Make sure
you
send
get the family rate.
Yeah, totally. It's gonna be rad, man.
Send us the details when you get it, because we can always.
I will.
We'll add to this. People will be listening to this, in a few months too. So we'll make sure it's down below. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for joining us again, Jared. Any closing thoughts, Joel, before we jump? Other than that, we'll see you on the next one.
No, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I love this. Love it.
Stay tuned for part 3, horror stories with Jared Hope.
Love it.